live on all of the platforms here. So, let us begin. We've been continuing our daily reading of Srimad Bhagavatam. Very, very important that we do this every day, or as much as possible, because when we don't associate with that which is true, that which is presenting truth, we associate with that which is the opposite of that, or you could say false or illusory or temporary. And then ultimately one's life becomes false or illusory or temporary. So if everyone actually wants to exist in truth, which is I would recommend, Jesus says the truth will set you free, and honestly, any sincere scientist, any sincere philosopher, any sincere person will be trying to exist in truth. So this is why the Bhagavatam is for, is to present truth on a daily basis, so that we can hopefully exist in truth, and then also take the benefits thereof. Our true nature is one of eternality, full of knowledge and full of bliss. This is what is said of the true nature. It's called Satchidananda. But unfortunately, we're in a condition now where there's full of illusions or full of untruths, asat. It's not an eternal situation, it's a temporary situation. We're full of ignorance instead of knowledge. There's so much that we don't know. We're always bewildered and confused and don't exactly know what to do, even for our petty material desires. What's to speak of the meaning of life and so on. And then instead of ananda, we're experiencing misery. It's temporary, full of ignorance and full of misery. So this is why we read Bhagavatam. So we don't do this. We go through this type of hard existence, actually. But I'll stop being so morose, and I'll give you some good news. Is that here's the enlightenment. Narada is showing us how he's telling how he had climbed out of this, temporary, ignorant, and miserable situation of the material world, which is the natural state of the darkness of this world. So we'll learn about that today. But before we do, we will do our everyday prayers to the gurus who have, not only the gurus opened our darkened eyes and filled us with the torchlight of knowledge, but to the many great spiritual personalities up to the Supreme Lord himself. So, Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjanashalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Gadamayam Dadati Swapadantika Mandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Guru Vaishnavam Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sagana Raghunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishaka Vishantam Shri Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namaste
तप्त कांचन गौरांगी राधे वृंदावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये वाञ्छकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्यैव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौरभक्तवृंद। हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। नमस्ते सरस्वती गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ॐ नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ॐ नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। नारायणं नमस्कृत्य नरं चैव नरोत्तमं देवीं सरस्वतीं व्यासं ततो जयमुदीरये। Before reciting this Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the very means of conquest, one should offer respectful obeisances unto the personality of Godhead Narayan, unto Nar Narayan Rishi, the supermost human being, unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, and unto Srila Vyasdev, the author.
Sri Krishna, the personality of Godhead, who is the Paramatma in everyone's heart and the benefactor of the truthful devotee, cleanses desire for material enjoyment from the heart of the devotee who has developed the urge to hear his messages, which are in themselves virtuous when properly heard and chanted.
By regular attendance in the classes on the Bhagavatam and by rendering service to the pure devotee, all that is troublesome to the heart is almost completely destroyed, and loving service unto the personality of Godhead, who is praised with transcendental songs, is established as an irrevocable fact. Jai.
So let us become more regular, overcoming the obstacles to our Naishtika Bhakti or Nishta Bhakti, like drowsiness. Drowsiness is one of the obstacles. Incompetence is one of the obstacles. That being materially absorbed is one of the obstacles. Having a taste for all kinds of material pleasures. Being distracted is one of the obstacles. Where we're trying to do bhajan, trying to do worship, but our mind is thinking about so many other things. And then the last is bitterness. There's an actual bitterness in the process where we don't have any taste at all for bhakti or bhajan. So we must somehow, hopefully, overcome some of these obstacles. And through finding someone else who's overcome the obstacles, we can also learn from them, and we can begin the process of overcoming the obstacles so that we too can become fixed. What that means, there's one thing to do the actual practices, right? Like we chant 16 rounds, we follow 4 regulative principles and things like this. But if the mind is always meditating on breaking the regulative principles, even while following the regulative principles, how fixed are you in the regulative principles? Like, for instance, you might be fixed in a regulative principle. You know, like, oh, I'm celibate. You know, like, look at me, I'm not practicing sex life. But if you're always meditating on different ways you can enjoy a sex life, how much are you really practicing celibacy? Right? So like that. And similarly, you know, when we chant 16 rounds, we're trying to chant Hare Krishna. But if we're chanting Hare Krishna, and in the midst of our chanting Hare Krishna, we're thinking like, oh, I need to get my rounds done, or I can't wait to finish this so I can actually do what I really want to do, or I can go do this later. And how much are we actually really doing bhajan or worship of Sri Krishna? You know, we're not actually. So this is the process we need to focus on, is how to actually immerse ourselves in meditation on the Lord, and not just try and count a bunch of times that you chant a mantra, or you know, round up a bunch of you know, things. I did this today, I did this today, I did this today, spiritual like achievements or something like that. But if the heart is not absorbed, then, you know, how much did we really do? You know, so and I've seen that I've done a lot of. Nothing's a waste of time in regard to the Lord. Even your insincerity is not a waste of time. The Lord is noting all of these things and He's helping you. But I've essentially, in comparison to what I could have done in sincere bhajan, I've essentially wasted so much time in insincere bhajan, that if I would have utilized that time in sincere bhajan, I would have had so much more character development, so much more spiritual emotion, so much more closer to the actual goal of true divine love or prem. So anyway, these are some of the reflections I've had lately, and I'll share them with you. But actually, as I'm learning, this is the process for everyone's devotional life, except there's some very special souls who are very much attached to Krishna, his pastimes, like the devotees in Vrindavan and so on, and they get to maybe skip a few steps. But for the most of us, we're not there, you know. So we have to build to that process, to being able to enter into that process, and that's what the Bhagavatam is going to help us do.
People are like saying that it's difficult to hear.
Who's people?
I mean, Sita Devi just is saying that.
My wife is saying, so just bring it closer to me. So, okay. So, I was going to say, like, what? People don't watch this, you know? So what do you mean, people? Just my wife, you know, so that's a different thing. Who is that? Parth. And Parth. Okay. Parth better be watching after skipping today. Parth should know we're very angry with him with his leaving for work.
Is he at work?
Yeah, he's leaving for work early. He should do his morning sevas and then be ready for work all day if he has to. But no problem. I'll lightly chastise him. Let's continue. Narada has been enlightening us how the Bhaktivedantists, who were very kind to the poor-hearted souls, they instructed him in confidential subject matters about the personality of Godhead. And by that, Narada could clearly understand the influence of Krishna's energies in many different facets. He's the creator, the maintainer, the annihilator of everything. And by knowing that, actually, one can return to him and personally meet him. By just knowing all of Krishna's energies and how everything is set up, now you also know the path. The path is lit up of what you need to do, and ultimately it's to return to him and to personally meet him, actually. To actually take darshan. We always come to the temple and we take darshan, or we think we're taking darshan. But really what's happening is they're taking darshan of you. You're not getting the darshan of them, because as you look upon the deity, even though the Lord is there, we don't have the eyes to see the Lord, and we have the eyes maybe try and exploit the morty or the deity and be like, okay, I'm looking upon you because I want you to grant me some material desire, or I want you to grant me some mundane thing. So this is very, very prominent in the beginning of our spiritual practice, where we aren't achieving pure bhakti, ananya bhakti. We're experiencing maybe some mishra bhakti, or maybe the prominence is on karma or jnana, and there's maybe a little bhakti in there. So we should be very, very careful about what our actual means for approaching Krishna really is. So anyway, we're going to learn. We're in the first canto. We're just about touching the toes of Krishna in the Bhagavatam. He's said to be, his 2 feet are the first 2 cantos of Bhagavatam. And you slowly, especially when you look at someone with reverence, you start by honoring their feet, and then you slowly rise your darshan up to their face. In Indian etiquette, it's still very prominent where they touch superior's feet. They go to the feet first, and then they'll go and maybe speak with them. So similarly, when approaching Krishna, the Bhagavatam, the first 2 cantos are said to be his feet. So let's go at his feet and see how we can rise up to this pure ananya bhakti state, that maybe we could will be Krishna's smiling face, and so on, in the 10th canto. But anyway, etat samsuchitam brahmam. We're on 1:532, if you guys didn't know. Tapatraya chikitsitam Yadishware Bhagavati Karma Brahmani Bhavitam Etad, this much, Samsuchitam, decided by the learned. Brahman, oh Brahman, Vyas. Tapatraya, 3 kinds of miseries. Chikitsitam, remedial measures. Yat, what? Ishware, the Supreme Controller. Bhagavati, unto the personality of Godhead. Karma, one's prescribed activities. Brahmani, unto the great. Bhavitam, dedicated. Translation. O Brahman Vyasadeva, it is decided by the learned that the best remedial measure for removing all troubles and miseries is to dedicate one's activities to the service of the Supreme Lord, Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna. Oh, that's pretty straightforward. If you're looking for a remedial measure for removing troubles and miseries, you guys have each individually come to me with different troubles and miseries that you're experiencing in this world. And now look, someone has given you the remedial measure. Not someone, Narada Muni has given you the remedial measure. This is this nice book here, Narada Muni. So, dedicate one's activities to the service of the Supreme Lord, Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna. Ishware Bhagavati, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Purport. Sri Narada Muni personally experienced that the most feasible, I know what feasible means, I think, but just so I know for sure how easily or conveniently possible to do. The most conveniently feasible and practical way to open the path of salvation or get relief from all miseries of life is to hear submissively the transcendental activities of the Lord from the right and bona fide sources. This is the most easy, practical way. This is the only remedial process. The entire material existence is full of miseries. Foolish people have manufactured out of their tiny brains many remedial measures for removing the threefold miseries pertaining to the body and mind, pertaining to the natural disturbances and in relation with other living beings. There's so many. I was just thinking of, when you have uncontrolled sex life for many years, the dysfunction of the genitals actually is something that becomes prominent. And so they call this in the West, it's very popular because they'd have horrible diets, and then they also have, just uncontrolled sex life for many, many years. So very popular for men to get what's called ED, or erectile dysfunction. So why are you talking about erectile dysfunction? Because I'm just thinking of, all of the, fantastic ways that scientists they create drugs to try and, their misery is they can't continue on with their sex life as they get old. So they make drugs like Viagra that do crazy things to make sure that the genitals are working in a semi-functional way. But it's just what kind of a tiny-brained type of, nonsense is this? Take these drugs and this will remove your miseries. But they do this with everything. Blood pressure medication. Instead of, also Americans, they die of heart disease and high cholesterol. And why? Because they eat animals unrestrictedly. They have no consciousness that by mercilessly slaughtering animals and eating them, that it's actually causing their bodies a great distress and harm. So instead of, again, just stopping doing the thing that's causing them the misery, they say, let me take this drug, this blood pressure medication to lower this so I can continue my nonsense activities. But they're not realizing it's only causing more and more miseries later on. So there's many things like this. And you see this very popular, but this is becoming prominent too in Kali Yuga ignorant society. I mean, I know a lot of Indians also who, as they get older, they're on 15, 20 different medications. And who knows, maybe some of your parents, some of my parents, some, grandparents, this is the type of lifestyle. But this is all, tiny-brained type of ways to try and overcome some of the miseries, when really, it's all because we don't know the real purpose of life. And if we knew the real purpose and that which is favorable to service to the Supreme Lord, naturally we'll want to be free of intoxications and all of these other outside influences, and we'll just really be focused on that. And in that, all the other things will be taken care of. You'll be healthy, you'll be happy, all these other things. And even when the body is ready to break, because it will break at some point, then no problem. You're ready, you're excited because you feel you're going to personally meet the Lord, or you're going to get closer, you're going to be in a better situation to personally meet the Lord in the future. So there's no worries for the devotees. Anyway, this is just what I was thinking of all of these tiny-brained ideas of the scientists to try and overcome the miseries. But there's so many things. Anyway, the whole world is struggling very hard to exist out of these miseries. But men do not know that without the sanction of the Lord, no plan or no remedial measure can actually bring about the desired peace and tranquility. The remedial measure is to cure a patient by medical treatment is useless if it is not sanctioned by the Lord. To cross the river or the ocean by a suitable boat is no remedial measure if it is not sanctioned by the Lord. I'm sorry, I thought of one more really crazy remedial. Right now in the political sphere in the U.S., abortion is a big topic. I might get in trouble by talking about such things, but one side is okay with late-term abortions, and one side does not like them, and that's fine. I mean, they can argue about this thing. But actually, it was interesting, the misery in that situation is that they have, maybe they were not fully controlled in the sex life. There may be other circumstances where something crazy has happened, like a rape or something, but most of the time it's just weren't controlled in the sex life, and then they get pregnant. And then they had this one lady wanted to make a point. I saw it on social media yesterday. So she wanted to call the abortion clinic to see if they could do a late-term abortion. It was 34 weeks. And surprisingly, they were just so standard, yeah, no problem. Come on in, this is what we'll do. And they were explaining the process. And it's crazy, actually. the process they have to kill the baby in the womb and then to pump drugs into the woman so that she will deliver the dead baby. And that's what an abortion is. You don't really know. It's like, oh, it's just like a medical procedure. But it's like, no, you're going in there, you're murdering a baby, and then you're drugging the woman so that she can deliver the dead baby. And it's just like such a hard experience. But this is like one of those really, tiny-brained ideas on how to actually, relieve a misery. Like, oh, you're pregnant? Don't worry about it. We'll relieve this misery. Now, I don't know, killing a human being, there is consequence to that, whether the law punishes you or not. So that's a whole nother thing. But, but this is, not realizing you're creating more misery by doing this. One, you've murdered a baby, and there is, that soul, will feel slighted, most likely. It is conscious. And it will, who knows, it may even want to take revenge on you in the future. And if that's the case, you may be implicated to, have some type of karma with that soul in the future. And many times this is the case. This is how karma works. It's very, what goes around comes around, this type of thing. Anyway, I was just thinking of that. I was just really disturbed yesterday because I was like seeing this process, and I'm like, it's really like a monstrosity, actually. But it's so commonplace now, even so, to the point of one political party is like, of the modern day, is flouting, like, yes, we believe in this type of thing. And not only that, a large majority of people are celebrating, yes, this is good. But this is crazy, actually. But anyway, this is... should not get political. But this is an example of what Prabhupada is saying.
I think we were talking back in the van as well.
Yeah, we talked about this once upon a time as well, about this.
Life,
this type of thing. And Prabhupada actually, he did not recommend, getting abortions. Prabhupada was not a politician. Prabhupada wasn't taking political sides. His political side is that they were all rascals, and that we need someone who's actually a devotee of the Lord to run the heads of state.
That's the dream.
Yeah, it might just be a dream. Only a dream, because that's in Kali Yuga, good chances that won't happen, But, these remedial measures, they have to be sanctioned by the Lord. And for whatever reason, the Lord does sanction things like late-term abortions and things like that. But he also sanctions the consequences that will come for doing such things. So anyway, we should know for certain that the Lord is the ultimate sanctioning officer, and we must therefore dedicate our attempts to the mercy of the Lord for ultimate success, or to get rid of the obstacles on the path of success. The Lord is all-pervading, all-powerful, omniscient, and omnipresent. All-pervading means everywhere. He's all-powerful, all-knowing. That's omniscient. And omnipresent, also, it's like all-pervading. He's everywhere. He is the ultimate sanctioning agent of all good or bad effects. We should therefore learn to dedicate our activities unto the mercy of the Lord and accept him either as impersonal Brahman, localized Paramatma, or the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It does not matter what one is. One must dedicate everything in the service of the Lord. If one is a learned scholar, scientist, philosopher, poet, etc., then he should employ his learning to establish the supremacy of the Lord. We talked about this a few weeks back. Try to study the energy of the Lord in every sphere of life. Is Parth still listening? Parth's there? Yeah, so Parth. Try to study the energy of the Lord in every sphere of life. He's working with the energies of the Lord through antennas, harnessing the sound waves of the Lord and transmitting them. So that's wonderful. Serve the devotees with these energies. Do not decry him. What is decry? Publicly denounce. Now what's denounce? I think it's to, look favorably upon someone. Oh, to publicly declare to be wrong or evil. So don't, Yes, there's many people. You know, I used to be an atheist, and I used to listen to a lot of these atheistic. You know, like one guy who's kind of big in even the political and comedy sphere is Bill Maher. I used to like this guy. The only reason he's in my head, I visited my parents recently, and my mom loves Bill Maher, which is not so wonderful. But anyway, this guy, he's very you know, always like critical of God. I used to love it. I used to also be critical. Yeah, you know, like, why does God in the Bible do this? And you know, I'll be honest, it's a little easier to criticize God of the Bible than it is, because there's not so much information given as to why God does what he does in certain circumstances. Where if I found it was a lot harder to criticize God when studying, you know, say the Bhagavad Gita or the Vedic canon. But also, there's many people who could also criticize the Lord. You know, like the killing of Bali of Ramachandra is sometimes people want to criticize the Lord. You know, Sita's you know trial, you know, being put into an exile as well. Many people want to criticize the Lord for such things. But we should, as Prabhupada is saying, where's the decry?
Many of the devotees say that part was actually
Lately added.
it is not in
Valmiki Ramayana.
Valmiki Ramayana. It's not bona fide.
What's that?
The Sita's.
I mean the Uttar Ramayana, after Ramayana.
Yeah. Oh, I don't know. I won't be so bold. I do know that our acharyas have mentioned they've had no problem with this. So I won't speculate as to whether.
It's seen very wrong, in a wrong way. Even if she was pregnant, then actually Ramchandra sent her to the devotees, actually to the rishis, and that was a very standard procedure during that time. That the woman needs to be in the ashram, and then she needs to serve a saintly personality. In that way she gets the blessings.
Yeah. There.
And that was done in a garb of no, I have to send you somewhere and something like that. But it's the people who don't understand the principle, they would always.
Yeah, well, you know, this is the main thing, is that we're not here. We have a tiny intelligence, and the Lord has, you know, you could ask why Krishna sanctioned for the entire slaughtering of his whole, race. It's not that he personally did it, but he participated in it. And what was happening, but it was to fulfill, you know, a Brahman's curse. And ultimately what's happening at the spiritual level. Like, for instance, you remember when Mother Ganga was killing the children of Shantanu. At the demigod level, she was helping her friends demigods who had to take a fallen birth in the material world, and she was helping them get back. You know, yes, the Ashtavasus. But from Shantanu's level, because he has the perverted material intelligence, this is a child murderer, this woman. You know, so this is, you know, we don't know what's going on. The Lord is, we just have to understand the Lord's position, and if we try and judge him from our mundane morality, we'll miss the point. That's why, some sides can justify practices like, murdering children in the womb, also known as abortion, but, murdering children in the womb, or why many people can justify the murder and eating of animals, or why many people can justify, what's that? Yeah, illicit sexual relations, because they don't see the consequence that they're actually doing harm, because they don't have the higher vision that they are actually doing harm. Science is now just proving that animals and plant life can feel pain and things like that. They probably have known that, but they wanted to conveniently ignore that fact. But when I was a kid, we used to fish, fishing, and I got told that by my fishing buddies, even though it was pretty obvious that the fish are in pain, like, oh no, they don't feel pain in this part of their body, like, no, they like literally, it's just like how they like the ignorant cope with the fact that they're like, doing something morally wrong. No, there's no pain in that. Like, surely there's pain. You just jammed a hook through its lip. Like you would be in immense pain if someone did that to you. Like, but anyway, this is what we do. We like to minimize. Oh no, that's not wrong. I've heard devotees, I've heard plenty of people justifying. Yeah, it's okay to lie. Because there's actually, there is some sanction in the Vedas where, if you're doing business, if you're fully truthful doing business, there's no business. Like, for instance, if you are doing business with somebody and be like, oh, I'm selling you fruits. And they're like, all right, I want the fruits for the price that you got the fruits for. And you tell them, okay, okay, I got it for this amount. You have to make profit in business. You can give someone a better deal, but if you don't make profit in business, there's no business. There's no sustenance of the life and things. So there's there is said to be some injunction where you could, exaggerate the truth in doing business, at least on the varnashram level. But actually, Brahmins and those at the devotional level should be, fully truthful. We chant that verse, Srinvatam Svakata Krishna Punya Shravana Kirtana. Krishna is the benefactor of the truthful devotee. But I've heard also devotees say, oh yeah, you could lie, it's no problem, as long as you're doing business. Like, what? This is not, this is like pseudo-devotee type of things. I'm not trying to criticize anyone, but this is things where where
Business, yeah, but we have to lie. Some way or the other, we have to lie.
what's that?
In the business world, though, we have to.
Yeah, there has to be some exaggeration. I mean, you guys are doing all these interviews and things like that, and they're like, "Oh, are you qualified to do this?" Oh, absolutely. If you tell them, like you're not qualified, if you're fully truthful in your interviews,
Because
you'll.
they are also not very truthful.
No,
They
no,
also
it's.
need a lot of things, but
Yeah,
they just need some skills, but they put. Oh, we
Yeah,
always
so
do
there
this.
are circumstances where you're going to be forced, but ultimately, especially in devotional matters, and especially in dealing with devotees, and especially in dealing with, the Supreme Lord, obviously we should be fully truthful. So anyway, we got sidetracked, but he says, do not decry him or and try to become like him or take his position simply by fragmental accumulation of knowledge. This is what we do. Try to be the Lord, or like say criticize the Lord of the Bible or the Quran or anything like this. If one is an administrator, statesman, warrior, politician, etc., then one should try to establish the Lord's supremacy in statesmanship. Fight for the cause of the Lord, as Sri Arjuna did. In the beginning, Sri Arjuna, the great fighter, declined to fight, but when he was convinced by the Lord that the fighting was necessary, Sri Arjuna changed his decision and fought for his cause. Similarly, if one is a businessman, an industrialist, an agriculturist, etc., then one should spend his hard-earned money for the cause of the Lord. Think always that the money which is accumulated is the wealth of the Lord. Wealth is considered to be the goddess of fortune, Lakshmi, and the Lord is Narayan, or the husband of Lakshmi. Try to engage Lakshmi in the service of Lord Narayan and be happy. That is the way to realize the Lord in every sphere of life. The best thing is, after all, to get relief from all material activities and engage oneself completely in hearing the transcendental pastimes of the Lord. That's what Narada is saying is ultimately how you overcome all miseries of life, is hear the pastimes of the Lord. But in case of the absence of such an opportunity, one should try to engage in the service of the Lord everything for which one has specific attraction, and that is the way of peace and prosperity. The word samsuchitam in this stanza is also significant. One should not think for a moment that the realization of Narada was childish imagination only. It is not like that. It is so realized by the expert and erudite scholars. Erudite means like very learned. And that is the real import of the word Suchitam. So, Narada, one, we should definitely not criticize Narada, in his conclusions. But it's decided by the learned that the best remedial measure for moving all troubles and miseries is to dedicate one's activities to the service of the Supreme Lord, Personality of Godhead, who is Sri Krishna.
Yeah.
So, very good. Let's continue on reading. Amayo yascha bhutanam jayate yena suvrata tadeva yamayam dravyam napunati chikitsitam amaya diseases yacha whatever bhutanam of the living being jayate become possible yena by the agency suvrata O good soul tat that eva very he certainly amayam disease dravyam thing na does it not punati cure chikitsitam treated with. O good soul, does not a thing applied therapeutically cure a disease which was caused by that very same thing? So now Narada is asking like a rhetorical question to Vyasadeva. Purport: an expert physician treats his patient with a therapeutic diet. For example, milk preparations sometimes cause disorder of the bowels. But the very same milk converted into curd and mixed with some other remedial ingredients cures such disorders. This is an example. This is all you see this in many places throughout, like the Bhagavatam. This statement that they use curd to actually cure diseases caused by milk. It's the same thing. Yes. Go ahead.
If a snake bites you, you can die of the poison. But if that same poison is used to make a lot of medication.
Yes, that's as well with anti-venom.
Yeah.
Venom and anti-venom. Even what is the vaccination process? Now, I personally want nothing to do with vaccinations, but the whole idea of vaccination is using the very thing that is the disease to supposedly cure the disease. Now, maybe in theory it does work. I'm not. The other things they're putting in there that frightens me. But anyway, that's another political discussion. I'm not getting involved today. But that's the same principle. Does not a thing applied therapeutically cure a disease which was caused by that very same thing? I was just thinking that there's a sexually transmitted disease called herpes. You've probably heard of it. Like you get like an open sore. It's very popular in the West to get these type of diseases and things like that. Actually, I think it's everyone says the herpes is like prominent. Almost everyone has the herpes, some degree or another. But if you ever have like an open sore, actually you could use poison ivy to cure it. Like poison ivy is like a poison, but in regard to like an open sore, especially in herpetic sores, poison ivy is actually like a cure for such things. So this is, example of anything applied therapeutically can cure disease. But that you could use the same thing to cure a disease caused by that very same thing, like anti-venom and venom. That's a really good example. Sahil, and also curd to cure milk disorders by milk. Which is interesting. Similarly, the threefold miseries of material existence cannot be mitigated simply by material activities. Such activities have to be spiritualized, just as by fire iron is made red hot, and thereby the action of fire begins. Similarly, the material conception of a thing is at once changed as soon as it is put into the service of the Lord. Like for instance, food can cause us so many problems, but if we take that same food, the same ingredients and everything, and we offer it to the Lord, it actually becomes, it spiritualizes things. It's the therapeutic use of that which is causing us disease, and so on. And so, like the same thing, sex life. sex life is the desire of all in the material world. It's how the material population keeps spawning and material life keeps going. But if you use sex life for the procreation and the bringing about a devotee in the world and raising devotees and following that process, this is a very, very amazing thing for one's spiritual life. So, and maybe in my life, me and my wife will undergo this process sooner or later. But this is, maybe something you're all gonna, go through. So this, the very same thing that is causing so much problem is people are illicitly trying to sexually engage in the world. If having children in the proper sanction of marriage and for the proper conception of wanting to raise a devotee, that very same thing will purify you significantly. Like for instance, if you have, let's say, sex unrestrictedly, that's one thing. But if once a pregnancy happens, you're not supposed to have sex. And especially as the child is forming in the womb, it's like, it's a great disservice to the wife and the child to continue sex. It's amazing though, because you look in the West, people they so much recommend having sex during pregnancy. This is very...
That is by the doctor?
What's that? By the doctors, yeah. By the doctors, everybody. They very much recommend having sex during pregnancy. It's horrible. This is a huge disservice psychologically to the baby. It's a huge disservice. It's the baby is not very far up there. You'd be shocked how close the baby is, and to, do that act while pregnant is really actually a big disservice psychologically to the mother, psychologically to the baby, even psychologically to yourself, but also physically. It's very... I don't know how we got to this topic again, but this is, but basically, so what I'm saying is the devotional way, by having sex for children and undergoing a pregnancy, it actually is going to help you control from the urge to have sex, because really for about 10 months you should be abstaining from sex. At least with that one. That's why sometimes they had other wives and things like that back then. But, for us, that probably won't be the case. So it'll be very therapeutic. We'll have to control for sex. So this is...
almost like 18 months.
Yeah. This is a very, by having sex the one time, it'll control you. Now, most people in the West, they cannot fathom controlling the sexual urge for that long. But like I said, we said earlier, there's always consequences for everything that we do, and there's so much in the womb trauma that we don't realize is being caused, that have been caused by us, especially, my parents did their best with the knowledge that they did, but I have so much childhood trauma, and I'm sure I even have in the womb trauma. There's just so much going on that is...
In this regard, actually, there is a really nice story in Narsingh Puran, where I was listening to lecture yesterday on that, and so Hiranyakashipu actually was doing meditation. He used to go to meditate on Lord Brahma, and Narad Muni did know that if he succeeds in that, he might get a son from some son who would be would create more havoc than he is creating.
Yes.
So Narad Muni and his good friend Parvata Muni, they actually took form of birds, and the place where he was meditating on Brahma, they both went and started discussing about Hari, and they started chanting his glories and telling the pastimes and those things, and he was more into formless God or those things. He was not very into Hari. So he got very irritated. He was like, who are these birds? Wherever I go, they come and they are like Krishna, Krishna, or Narsim, Narsim, or the names of God. And he really got irritated. And that night when he went back home, he actually did the union. And while he was doing, he was irritated. Why are they talking Krishna, Krishna, Krishna? I mean, he had that philosophy in his mind going on, and because of that, Prahlad Maharaj appeared actually. And that was the divine arrangement.
Maybe.
No, I mean in that way, because he took that. And
Honestly, no, it's good. You know,
and when Narad Muni came and when he was in the womb, he got Bhagavatam as well.
yeah, this is actually this is the way to actually become free from this sexual. This is the biggest plague, is everyone is so addicted to sex life. So this is the way to freedom is actually to talk of the pastimes of the Lord and how sex life should be properly used. And actually, then yourself, if you do properly use sex life in your life, you'll have children one day. You'll find if you're of good character and conscious, you will not, it will absolutely purify you from this urge and instinct. So let's go back. Similarly, the material conception of a thing is at once changed as soon as it is put into the service of the Lord. That is the secret of spiritual success. We should not try to lord it over the material nature, nor should we reject material things. The process Rupa Goswami calls is yukta vairagya. We should only get rid of things that we can't use for the service of the Lord. The best way to make the best use of a bad bargain, yes, we're in the material world, it's a bad bargain, is to use everything in relation with the Supreme Spiritual Being. Everything is an emanation from the Supreme Spirit and by His inconceivable power. He can convert spirit into matter and matter into spirit. Therefore, a material thing, so-called, is at once turned into a spiritual force by the great will of the Lord. The necessary condition for such a change is to employ so-called matter in the service of spirit. That is the way to treat our material diseases and elevate ourselves to the spiritual plane where there is no misery, no lamentation, and no fear. When everything is thus employed in the service of the Lord, we can experience that there is nothing except the Supreme Brahman. The Vedic mantra that everything is Brahman, or Aham Brahmasmi, is thus realized by us. So this is the way to ultimately have real, true spiritual realization, is to spiritualize everything that we're interacting with. Books about Krishna, artistry, art about Krishna, things, material things like flowers, and they're not for our enjoyment. Ooh, let me go smell all the flowers. Ooh, let me go taste all the food. Let me go enjoy all the intoxications. We can use these things for the Lord. All these things. Well, certain things. There's prescribed ways to do that. We, in the Bhakti Yoga process, we do a whole morning program. Ghee and fire and water, all these things are material elements, but when offered in worship to the Lord, they become spiritualized, where we feel it when we take the blessings of the ghee lamp. We feel like a spiritual blessing come over us, and this would ordinarily be a material thing. When we, the devotees, we seek to please put the blessed water on my head. We feel nourished and blessed by such things. Normally it was a material thing, but then when offered to the Lord, we burn these incenses, we offer. And then we actually take them, like if you ever, we give them as gifts to people, incenses that we've used as offering. And when people burn that incense that was already offered to the Lord, they feel like, wow, this is cleansing, this is spiritualizing the environment. So this is the science. We should offer everything to the Lord. Even, right, we talked a lot about sex today. But the sex life, this is the main thing, especially we're all young men. This is the thing that is driving the consciousness is so much. It's so much. Get married and then, utilize this for the Lord's service. Have children, have family, raise devotees. There's a need for actual pure devotees out there. There's so much, in the world. I'm reading about, Bhaktivinoda Thakur. He makes this very clear that actually what goes on for the name of being a devotee, and I'm not here to criticize devotees, but just, Bhaktivinoda Thakur is saying that actually most of it is pseudo-devotee. Most of it is, devotee it looks like kind of like a devotee. Maybe externally it looks like a devotee, but the actual consciousness is more inclined towards karma or jnana or mystic perfection. And actually, if you evaluate yourself, you're going to find pseudo-devotee. I'm a pseudo-devotee. I'm not actually, practicing pure devotional service. Now, let's say we should criticize it's glorious that anyone takes any devotional inkling. It's glorious. But we should follow in the footsteps of pure devotees. We should worship pure devotees. We should try and hear from pure devotees, like Srila Prabhupada, and there are those following in his footsteps who are authorized representatives. So anyway, we should do our best here. Therefore, a material thing, so-called, is at once turned into a spiritual force by the great will of the Lord. The necessary condition for such a change is to employ so-called matter in the service of spirit. That is the way to treat our material diseases and elevate ourselves to the spiritual plane, where there is no misery, no lamentation, and no fear. We read all this already. This is how we can realize that Aham Brahmasmi, everything is Brahman. I think we'll have to end here. Sorry I did so much talking today, but there was a lot of geopolitical things on my mind. There was a lot of other things.
Election season.
Yeah, and sex life and all these things. How to use these things for the Supreme Lord. So thank you guys. We'll continue on tomorrow.